How's it going? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Eric here from Peregrine Coffee Roasters. Today I wanted to dive into a subject that we get a ton of questions about and do another how-to / demonstration video. The subject of today's video, if you can't tell yet, is actually going to be espresso. Espresso is something that people perceive to be very difficult to do or very complicated, and it can be those things on the upper end, but definitely a lot of people are scared away from espresso when they shouldn't be. And so I want to break down different factors at play when it comes to how to make good espresso. I also want to dispel some myths that exist, whether that be home espresso, cafe level espresso. There's a lot of myths that exist either in the coffee industry itself or just as a consumer of coffee. You might have heard some different things that I would love to address and give you my take on. So today I actually brought in my own home espresso machine, which I know what you're thinking, where's the plug-in, where's the LED display? This is actually called a Flare Neo Flex, and it is a very low-cost entry point to home espresso. And the reason for that is because it actually is a manual espresso machine. It breaks it down to the bare bones of what makes good espresso. This is also a great place to start if you want to get into making espresso at home, but maybe you don't want to invest hundreds of dollars, $1,000 into a home espresso setup. It can make really awesome espresso, and I'm gonna show you how to do that. To use my Flare Neo Flex today, I do need to break down a few of the supplies that it's gonna require. Obviously, you have the device, which comes with this big lever and stand. It comes with a tamper. It comes with a ring so that you can easily pour your coffee into your portafilter. I'm gonna have some coffee. Today, we are going to be using Timberline because it is what we use in every espresso drink in our shop. It ends up being our best-selling coffee because it is a great brewed cup. It is great espresso. It is a great catch-all medium roast that everyone just loves. Highly recommend if you're starting out with espresso, it's something that is approachable. Because this is a manual device, I'm actually going to need my own hot water, and so I have a gooseneck kettle. I'm gonna have water pretty close to boil, which up here is 197 degrees. This is my subminimal scale, which actually will come into play when we're brewing so that I can measure my output. And then I'm going to have this little spray bottle just to spritz my beans. That helps as it goes through the grinder. It helps reduce static electricity. Also have this distribution tool, which is really fun. It's got this little bit on the bottom that helps it spin wide and narrow. But these are used to break up clumps in your bed of espresso, just to help that even extraction as the water flows through the coffee. Let's dive into some espresso misconceptions or myths, if you will. The first being that espresso is a specific type of bean, that only specific coffees are espresso. That is not correct. If you've engaged with any specialty coffee content creators, you'll have seen it said by now that any coffee can be espresso. So espresso really is a brew method. Espresso requires usually very finely ground coffee. It requires pressure, and it requires hot water. And how you press the water through the coffee, the ratio, the strength that you brew your coffee at, that is what makes espresso. And so I can have a light roast espresso, I can have a dark roast espresso, I can have an espresso blend, I can have a single origin espresso. One of the things that makes Peregrine special, and one of the things that I think makes us a specialty coffee roaster, a specialty coffee cafe, is the fact that we advertise and offer single origin espressos. So a coffee from a single place in the world, perhaps a single farm, a single region of a single country, that coffee used as an espresso. And so oftentimes that means you're having a very modern, fruit-forward, light roasted coffee as an espresso, as opposed to what was done traditionally, a coffee that was not traceable, it was not roasted light, it was very dark, different than today's modern espresso. There's so many options because you can brew whatever espresso tastes good to you. Another coffee myth that exists would be that fresher is always better, and that is just not the case, whether that is espresso, pour over. There's actually a perception, and I don't blame people when it comes to coffee, that fresh is best, because fresh always sounds better, whether that's fresh baked bread, fresh roasted coffee. However, I will say that in the specialty coffee industry, it has become the norm for most cafes to use aged espresso. We like our espresso in our shop to be at least a month old before we use it. And that sounds crazy, that sounds totally controversial, but I promise if you ask a lot of the specialty cafes, they will say, yeah, that's what we do. And the reason is because after coffee is roasted, it starts to release CO2, and it really does that for quite a while after it's roasted. And so it just makes coffee really hard to work with at the beginning. It either makes it brew poorly, it makes it not as flavorful, aromatic. There's a lot of good things that happen to coffee between the time it's roasted and the time it's 2 weeks old, a month old. When we sell really light roasted African coffees, we tell people these are the coffees that need the most rest. They need 2 weeks off the roast before they're really going to peak in flavor. I highly recommend trying the same coffee at a few days old, 2 weeks old, a month old, and just seeing the difference in the flavor. Obviously, we don't want coffee that's old and stale, but coffee kind of does a bell curve like a lot of things in life. That's enough rambling about espresso and our mantra. Let's actually get to brewing. Let's do a little bit of a demonstration as to what that might look like on this device. Let's go through setting up to brew a shot of espresso. My water is boiling. I'm gonna run through this really fast so that we can get to it. Every single time, it's like a fun little puzzle with this device. You gotta take everything apart, put it back together in the right order in order for it to work correctly. But you have this little portafilter right here with the screen on it. That is where your coffee is going to go. So you'll take this little ring right here. You're going to set it on top, nice and secure. You're gonna take your freshly ground coffee. Fine, like I said, you'll have to figure out your grind size just based on trial and error. You're gonna put it there in the top. Gonna knock it down where it's nice and level. And then you can take your distribution tool, like I mentioned previously. This is very satisfying, but you just move it around in there like one of those little scalp scratcher deals. Use that just to break up any clumps. Your espresso is gonna look nice and fluffy. Once you're at that point, you really wanna knock it down to where all of the espresso is now below your little ring on top. You're going to use this tamper to press the coffee down. You can give it a spin just to make sure it's nice and level. Then you have a bed of espresso there in your portafilter. After you have that ready, you're going to set this brew chamber on top. This is where the water is going to go, so it's assembled like that there, just like a little rocket ship. You can set the screen inside on top of your portafilter. So now you can see the brew chamber is closed off from the portafilter. You're not just pouring the hot water directly on the coffee. And so now we have that ready. You're gonna have this hot water, and there's a fill line actually in this brew chamber right there. You've got the little pressure gauge on top that is going to show you that you're doing a good job. It has a range of pressure that correlates with brewing espresso. It is going to tell you, hey, you need to give more pressure, less pressure, based on what it's showing on that little gauge. I have this scale underneath with a digital display that's super nice. The thing that I love about it is that it's both a cup and a scale, so I can pour my espresso into it and weigh the output as it's coming out. There will be a lot of resources online about what a good espresso ratio is. It's good to be able to weigh your output to understand that if you want to continue to dial in and get really advanced. I'm going to start pouring my espresso right here. So what I'm gonna do is just press down. You can see it's giving me some resistance. On my little gauge, it's saying, okay, I'm in the espresso range. Continuing to press and press and press. I'm getting that beautiful espresso pouring out below the lever. And you do not need to be a serious weightlifter in order to use this device, unless you grind your coffee crazy fine, and then it's going to give you a ridiculous amount of resistance and you'll know something is wrong. But yes, I've got espresso now. You can see maybe there in my cup, that beautiful color on top. That substance is called crema. Crema is a mixture of CO2 in your coffee. Crema is a good sign. If you see a good amount of crema, it means you have good fresh espresso, probably that brewed relatively well. That's a nice color. We're gonna go ahead and try it. So what you're looking for with an espresso is something that is balanced. Maybe it's chocolatey, nutty, sweet. Some people like things that are a little bit brighter or more fruit forward. What you're not looking for is sour or bitter or salty. Some of those things are a little bit hard to distinguish between, and that's something that we train our baristas on when we're tasting espresso. Is that sour or is it bitter? Is that astringent? All those different descriptor words, really when you get to the granular level of dialing in espresso, those are the types of things that can guide you. Like I said, espresso generally, majority of the time, is going to be very finely ground coffee. Exactly how fine is part of the fun of espresso. Fun maybe being a loose term for some, but there is what is referred to as dialing in specialty coffee shops, whether that's at the very beginning of the shift when we're opening and tasting things. What that entails is determining things like the exact grind size, the exact dose size, the output of the espresso. All of that process is called dialing in, and that exists at home, that exists in a cafe. What that is nailing that grind size, nailing those inputs, figuring out what outputs taste good. And the most important thing to guide your grind size is actually going to be your result. Grind size is going to be the main factor that you can tweak. You'll know, hey, this is really sour, so it probably under-extracted, which means it probably went through my puck of espresso a little bit too fast. So maybe I need to go a little bit finer. Alternatively, it could be really bitter because it took forever to pour the shot because you were too fine. You want to coarsen your grind. If you think about the idea of really finely packed clay versus some coarse sand, water runs through sand super easy because it's got these big particles that they don't pack that tight. And then you have clay, which packs into almost like literal cement, and water just stands on top of it. If you have espresso that is ground way too fine, the water will not push through your espresso. There's a lot of just dialing in, finding that sweet spot for espresso that can take years of training. But in order to get something enjoyable at home, you don't have to be an expert. You can definitely do this. Espresso is actually like a gateway to so many different drinks, right? If you are someone that loves iced lattes, congratulations. If you can make espresso, you can make real iced lattes at home, just like we do here. Although not as good, right? You still have to come and see us. But seriously, you can take this espresso, you can drink it straight. Congratulations, you're having a delicious espresso and all of your friends are going to be impressed. Or you can take this and do really simple milk drinks like a cortado. That would be cortado, cappuccino, latte, right? Just scaling up, and you can really see, hey, which espresso drink do I like? Really, it's just the strength and the ratio that changes between those drinks. You're using the same amount of coffee in all of them, but everyone's gonna have their preferred taste. Me personally, actually my favorite drink that I drink every day when I'm roasting coffee is an Americano, because I just love the taste of espresso. But everyone's gonna have their preference, and espresso is the key to many of the most popular coffee drinks. With this being a general guide for espresso, what I will say, because it always applies, the only thing that matters is whether you enjoy it at the end of the day. Taste is absolutely king. It does not matter what such and such says online about this is the best ratio for espresso or this is the best recipe for espresso. The only thing that really matters is how it tastes to you, right? When our baristas are dialing in the morning, they have to make sure the espresso tastes good, right? There was a time when we first opened where we were so determined that it had to be exactly 2 ounces of espresso in exactly 30 seconds. Otherwise, we're not serving it, right? It's not gonna taste good. And then we got into some ideas that really challenged our perception, and we broke free from that because that's part of learning specialty coffee. And it unlocked a whole new world, a whole new spectrum of espresso flavor, and really dialing in our espresso to be even better and better every day. Taste is subjective, and we never at Peregrine want to say we are the authority on coffee. Our taste is correct and everyone else is wrong. Absolutely not. We do not shame people's taste here. We do offer feedback and suggestions for the people that want it, but at the same time, it's always going to be subjective, and you need to figure out what tastes good to you. Espresso is a great brew method to expose that idea, because people can be really rigid with their espresso recipes and with the rules, but those things are not important if your espresso doesn't taste good. At the end of the day, you might stick to all of the rules and you might get worse results than if you had just experimented. And so, highly recommend experimenting, figuring out what tastes good to you, and letting that be how you make espresso.